taking time out of your busy schedules to come and listen to the Honourable Paul Hellyer. I am truly honored to be able to introduce him, to meet him again for the second time. I'm not a political person. I could care less about left and right, but what I do care about is what's right. And that's what Paul Hellyer is all about, is what's right. He's been doing what's right for a lot of years, and he's continuing to do so at 93 years old. I think sometimes he cares more about people's children than they do. He's here to tell you what's really going on in the world with our banking systems, with the CETA trade agreement, and hopefully enlighten us as to what we can do personally to make change. So, thank you very much.
I'd like you to hear me, but can you hear me if I turn this back, say, to there?
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah. Good. That'll give me a chance to wave my arms here and not do too much damage. But first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much. A, to all of you who have come, and B, especially to Lou Jones for being the point person and making sure that the event happened, that we had a venue for it, and that a few people at least found out about it, and for all of the work that's entailed. There's a lot of work entailed. But it doesn't just happen automatically, and someone has to do that, and she did it. And where are you, Lou? We'll give her a nice hand. These very generous introductions remind me that if my late mother were here, she'd believe every word of it. If my late father were here, being a realist, he would probably wonder who you were talking about. That's my last attempt at humor for the night, because what we're talking about is not funny. The original subject of my address at the beginning of the cross-country tour, some of you know that this is the final stop on a cross-country tour that started in September and has been going on and off most of the time since then. The original subject was a plan to make Canada really prosperous again. And some of us worked out a plan to do that, and I'm going to refer to it later. But then the Prime Minister announced he was going to fly to Europe on October the 27th to sign the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA. And so I added Code Blue, which, as some of you would know, was what they say in the hospitals when someone's had a cardiac arrest. Because that's the state we're in at the present time, with the government showing every sign of wanting to ratify and implement CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with Europe, which I call cleverly executed takeover agreement, because that's what it really is. I began to think of what the consequences that would be to the majority of Canadians, and it would change everything. Just change everything. But most of all, it would end for all time any hope of using the Bank of Canada to make Canada prosperous again. It would be game over. So I recruited a couple of friends to join me as plaintiffs in a federal court action, which we filed in court a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago, to ask the court to prevent the government from ratifying and implementing the treaty. The basis of that is that politicians have no inclination to look after the 99% of the people who need them most and who voted for them. And we're going to have to turn to the courts and see if they will do it for us. So now my lecture deals with both subjects, and that's probably okay because they are both primarily about money. What it is, its power, and why there never seems to be enough to provide jobs for the unemployed and to meet the many legitimate needs of governments at all levels to build new infrastructure and to maintain the old infrastructure. I don't know about Calgary, but I know in Toronto, maybe some of the water pipes are older, but they break in the wintertime and cause flooding and slow down traffic. And there's so much money that needs to be invested, not only to maintain, but in fact to build new and to provide transportation systems so that the average person, not the average person, but the average commuter in my town will take less than an hour each way to get to work and home every day, which must be it's a terrible pain. I've been involved 1 or 2 days, and it's not a good way to live. So it's impossible to understand the magnitude of and importance of the subject without putting it in the context of the real world. How did we get into the mess? Who was responsible? Who was calling the shots? Well, what I'm going to say points the finger, not specifically at any country, but probably more toward the United States than any other country. And let me assure you, I am not anti-American, because most of my collaborators in the work I've been doing are from the United States. But there are some people down there that are not good for the United States, and they're not good for Canada, and they're not good for the world. And those are the people that I will be referring to in broad terms. As early as October 1940, some members of the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington came to the conclusion that Hitler would lose the war and that they should start building an empire to take the place of the one that he planned. Would, of course, include the land that he had hoped to take over, including the United Kingdom. It would include all of North America, and it would include a number of Pacific Rim countries. And they've been working on it ever since. When the war ended, the US military decided they would like to get some of the Soviet, at least the Nazi scientists, to come and help them. And there was an operation called Paperclip. How many of you are familiar with it? Nearly everybody in the audience. Wow, that's something. And of course, they got a list of good scientists and asked the president for his permission. He said, okay, as long as they have not had any direct connection with the Nazi Party. And then, of course, the military ignored the condition that had applied for the approval and just brought whoever they wanted. And some of them have been very active Nazis during the war. And they gave them new identities, new CVs, and then new jobs in the United States, in the armed forces, in the civil government, and some of them, I do believe, in some of the intelligence agencies as well. A funny dichotomy, at least I think it's funny. Here is the CIA, one of the most mysterious organizations in the world, and perhaps one of the most dangerous in many ways. After the war, they had one hand out looking for Nazis who had slipped through the boundary somehow and were in the United States illegally so they could throw them out. The other hand, they were recruiting and bringing in Nazis and giving them new identities, new CVs, and all of the things necessary for a distinguished career in the United States. And that was the beginning of what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. It was allegedly to fight communism, of course, but he warned us that it was more than that. And unfortunately, like with most prophets,